Buenas tardes. Les doy la bienvenida a uno de los actos más esperados dentro de la programación de la Semana Cultural previa a la ceremonia de entrega de los Premios Princesa de Asturias. Nos sentimos enormemente felices al poder compartir con ustedes un encuentro dedicado a la figura de la galardonada este año con el Premio de las Artes, la gran actriz Meryl Streep. Además, tenemos la suerte de contar con la presencia de otra gran personalidad del cine y del teatro. Estamos muy agradecidos de que haya aceptado la invitación de la Fundación Princesa de Asturias para acompañarnos en este encuentro. Con todos ustedes, Antonio Banderas.
Buenas tardes. La primera sensación realmente es la de huir, ¿no? La de escaparse de aquí. Es muy impresionante el lugar y también es muy impresionante el evento al que he sido invitado. En primer lugar, he de agradecer eso, ¿no? La invitación a participar de los premios Princesa de Asturias de este año. Yo hace 41 años vine a Oviedo, al Teatro Campo Amor, con la Compañía Nacional de España, interpretando La hija del aire de Calderón de la Barca. En aquellos momentos, la líder de la compañía era Ana Belén y yo era un chico de 21 años. Ha pasado ya mucho tiempo de aquello, pero si alguien me hubiese dicho en aquel momento que iba a volver a Oviedo a tener una charla con Meryl Streep, no lo hubiese creído. He pensado en algún momento, pensé pues, en escribir algo, pero después pensé, ¿qué voy a decir realmente de una persona a la que se la conoce muy bien, sus películas, su trayectoria? Era muy difícil, me resultaba como meterme en un mundo medio farragoso, poético, tratando de ver la cantidad de premios que tiene. 21 nominación a los premios Oscars. 21 nominación, es algo extraordinario, ¿no? Yo tengo una, me quedan 20 para agarrar. Es increíble la carrera de esta mujer. Yo he tenido la ocasión, feliz ocasión, de compartir la pantalla con ella en dos películas. Una película basada en la novela de Isabel Allende, La casa de los espíritus, dirigida por Billy August, que la rodamos en el año 93 entre Portugal y Copenhague, y después, más recientemente, rodé con ella, dirigida por Steven Soderbergh, la película The Laundromat, teniendo también ambos como compañero a Gary Oldman. Más que el papel de ella como actriz, yo no voy a revelar, ¿qué voy a revelar? ¿No? Nada, pero lo que a mí me interesó mucho de trabajar con Meryl Streep fue su lado humano. Me fijé mucho en ella cuando ella no sabía que la estaba mirando, en su comportamiento en el set, que dice mucho de las personas con las que trabajamos, ¿no? Su cercanía, una persona simple y compleja al mismo tiempo, que se relacionaba con todo el mundo, con los equipos técnicos, con sus compañeros, siempre dispuesta a responder a una pregunta, a una demanda, cualquier cosa, siempre estaba ahí. Esa es la mujer a la que conozco, a la que quiero, respeto y admiro. Me voy a callar para dar paso, señoras y señores, a Meryl Streep.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, look how many. So many. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio. Oh, my gosh.
Ay.
Wow. Can you believe we're here?
No, I can't. The entrance is very impressive, right?
Yeah.
I didn't expect this thing.
I didn't expect it. It's like, I feel like, I told you, I feel like Taylor Swift. Oh.
We were just having today, and we were just talking about a number of things, that are common to us because of our profession. I will start from the beginning. My father and my mother, they were very strong theater aficionados. My brother and I, we used to go with them in the 60s. We were like 7, 8 years old. And I remember, because, at that time, I already watched movies, of course, on television. I went to the movies with them. But the theater had a very special feeling, something that is very difficult to reproduce on the screen, and it's the live effect. For me, it was in the theater that I felt the need to jump on the stage and to open that flame. The ignition of my career as an actor was there, in the theater, jumping on the other side of the mirror and having the possibility to tell stories. Do you remember what was that in you? What was the moment in which you said to yourself, I want to be an actress. That's what I would like to do in my life. When was that?
I remember when I was in high school. I was in a play called The Music Man. It's a musical. And I had never done anything like that. The only other play I had been in was in the 5th grade when I was 11, and I played a robot, which might come in handy in the future because that's where we're all going. But the other part I played, I was in a box. So this was the first time I'd walked out on a stage and seen all the people. And I was very nervous. But because it was a musical, the music led me in. You know how in a musical they play the overture first? And no matter how nervous you are, suddenly that music comes up. You're standing in the dark backstage, and you walk out and you're in a world. You're in a world already created by the music. And I fell in love with it then. But because at the very end of the play, everybody stood up and clapped, then I really knew this is something I wanted to do. My father loved to play the piano at home. He was a businessman, but he really came alive when he came home and could play and wrote his own music. And my mother was someone who periodically, like 2 or 3 times a year, she'd wake me up, all of us, my brothers and I, and she'd say, each individual child, she'd say, this is your day. You don't have to go to school. We are going to go into New York, and we're going to go to the theater. And we blew off school, and she'd take us in, and I saw the original Man of La Mancha with Georgia Brown and John Raitt. I saw Mary Martin in Peter Pan. I saw all these amazing performances, Diane Carroll in No Strings, and I think my mother's love of the theater, she gave it to me like food. Honestly, Antonio, honestly, I have had a push me, pull you relationship with acting. I didn't know from the time I was a child that I wanted to do this. I had an appetite for learning about all sorts of things. And I sort of, when I was younger, I felt it was frivolous to be an actress. It seemed like a silly thing, a vain vanity thing. And it's only as I grew, really, when I was in my 20s, that I understood the power of it and the value of it. And it wasn't just indulging myself. It was something important. It could be. And so I think I was ambivalent for many years, even as I would study drama and I would be in plays and I would love it and I would figure out how to give myself to it. I wasn't sure.
But so it was not until you got in the university in Yale that really
No, it wasn't
you
even,
stepped?
it was after university.
Even that?
Yeah, so I had gone to, you know, I'm so old. When this was all happening, it was the 60s and 70s in university, and it was a time of great tumult. The war in Vietnam, and there were student strikes, and it was kind of scary, talk of revolution. I went and lived in a commune in Vermont after I graduated, and we made plays, a way of escaping, really, the sort of militarism of the left that I felt in my school. It was not a great time for everyone. It was really upsetting. So once I was up in this kind of setting where we just gave plays to people in small towns, then I felt the connection. And I felt, this is something I want to take seriously. And I applied to different drama schools. There are very famous schools. One is in New York called Juilliard, and the other was at Yale. And the Juilliard application fee was $40. And I thought this was outrageous. And the Yale one was $15. So I went to that one. I didn't have any money. I was waiting on tables up in the country and doing the plays at night. And I got in, and I got a scholarship, and I worked all the time that I was there. Sometimes when you have to work hard for something, when no one's paying your way, you work harder, you're more, you discover its value to you. And it was there that my imagination took off. But still, the last year I was in, it's a 3-year course. I was 26 years old. And in the last year, I pulled an application for law school because I thought I should pay attention to the environment because I was very, very worried about it. I had read a lot about the degradation of the environment, and I thought that's what I'd do. I mean, finally I realized I could be an environmental lawyer, I could be a queen, I could be a waitress, I could be everything in the movies. The appetite to express yourself is central to being an artist. And I had to convince myself that my point of view was important, outside of what function I could fill in society. Because acting can feel, and the celebrity piece of it, and which I never anticipated would happen to me, that comes on like a tsunami when it happens, and suddenly you're there. But the connection to individual lives, the desire to filter what I know through the eyes of someone else, and to take what they know in a drama and tell the story. That's how I entered it.
That's not a relationship that you liked. I mean, all the side of the celebrity game, and you never play it, really. And you never played the celebrity. You never played that game. You know.
This terrifies me. This all is, and I'm 74. I should be used to it, but I'm not. and you know, I think so many people want to be actors for that reason.
Yeah.
That was I never wanted that.
You know, one night I was in Los Angeles having dinner, and suddenly somebody approached, and I just lifted my eyes, and it was a very familiar face. It was Raúl Juliá.
Oh.
And we started talking, and suddenly you came into the conversation. And you came into the conversation because he started talking about Shakespeare in the park. What are your memories of that time with the public theater, in the La Cour Theater, doing theater in the summer for people for free? How was that? I guess it's full of romanticism in a way.
Oh,
no?
it was a magic time. So that was about 1976, 77, around then. I still have Raul Julia on my arm. I have a, he's gone, he died. He died very young, actually. But in the first rehearsal for The Taming of the Shrew, he was gesturing with a pencil like this, like it was a sword. You know?
And he hurt you.
And he stabbed me in my arm. And so I have this little mark. Look, that's Raul.
Oh my God.
That's the little piece of lead still embedded in my forearm. Because, oh my gosh, it was magic. He was a big spirit, and it was a time, you know, he spoke very accented English. And in other theaters in New York, he wouldn't get this part to play.
What was the
in
play?
The
What was the play?
Taming of the Shrew, Shakespeare. Yeah. But Joseph Papp opened up the casting of the plays, of the Shakespeare in Central Park, to all sorts of different people that had been shut out of the theater up to that point. And he did what they called colorblind casting, and he had women playing men, and he did all these sort of really interesting experiments with Shakespeare. And it was a very lively place. But it was on a shoestring, you know, he was always barely making it until he fostered a production called The Chorus Line, a chorus line. And that went to Broadway, and it gave him a lot of money to keep the theater going. But it was...
It's a very interesting thing that many of the pillars, what we understand now, the pillars of the musical theater on Broadway, they were not produced initially on Broadway. They were, most of them coming from the public theater. Hair was one of them.
Hair was his,
Then
yes.
A Chorus Line.
Yes.
Recently, Hamilton was coming also from the public theater. What is that? Is Broadway is a little bit conservative, maybe?
It's hard to say now. Now it's different. Then it was more of a money-making proposition.
Right.
But Broadway is something that you can't really characterize. It's always changing according to the public tastes. Now I think a lot of things come in from movies, from the animated films of Disney, and they make a musical after the fact of a cartoon, so then they'll put it on. Very creative people are involved with those enterprises. But the thing about the public theater was that it was an incubator. It was a place where people could experiment. And Joe Papp had an attitude where he would nurture the writers, and he had a stable of people. Sam Shepard, he fostered all of his early work, lots of really wonderful, David Ray, lots of wonderful playwrights.
Let me just explain something in Spanish to the audience here. Public theater is not a public institution. I'm going to do it in Spanish.
Yeah.
El teatro público de Nueva York no es una institución pública tal y como las entendemos aquí en España. Es en realidad una institución privada, a non-profit organization, o sea, sin ánimo de lucro, pero en realidad, aunque tenga el nombre de teatro público, está subvencionada por gente privada, empresas y fundaciones, ¿no? Pero ha sido una institución ejemplarizante dentro del mundo del teatro norteamericano. But I would like to ask you about that, because in Europe we have a tendency to be very protectionist of our culture. France, for example, they dedicate an incredible amount of money coming from the government to La Comédie, or to the French theater or French movies, for the matter. In England, also here in Spain, Italy, Germany, all of those countries. But there is nothing like the National American Theater or the National American Ballet. Why is that?
Because there's no national American anything.
That's right.
No, it's, it started as a polyglot country, and nobody agrees with anything. So it's hard to get a unified incentive to do anything like that. Also, I think that in Europe, the literature of each individual country goes so deep. And ours is relatively new. Our dramatists are pretty much from the maybe 19th century, but mostly the 20th century. And it's just everything in the US for a long time was for profit, So you sink or swim on your own incentive, your entrepreneurial spirit. If your thing is good, you'll do well. But the idea of a national theater would involve the government subsidizing something.
And that is?
The government can't even function at this point, so,
We're never gonna get it there, right?
Forget the theater, yes.
So, because I started doing theater way before I did movies, way before. And in theater, you, as an actor, you are at the end of a process. You have the rehearsal time, you experiment in there, you search for your character, and you are under the hands of a director who has an opinion and he has an idea and a proposal. Yeah. And at the end, he disappears and it's you and the audience. But in movies, it's not like that.
Oh, it's different.
In movies, you just go in the middle of the process. You give the best material that you have, but you don't know what they're going to do with it. Yeah. They're going to take the material and then they're going to put a music that wasn't there when you were shooting. They probably is going to shrink the scene that you were doing. Yeah. They give it a different reading that you thought it was important to you. So how was for you just to jump from the stage to be in front of a camera?
Also, in the theater, the director disappears.
It's true.
After the rehearsal.
He goes away.
And you're in charge. You can do whatever you want, That's not true. But to a certain extent, the actor has more control of the gestalt of a performance in the theater. You live it from the moment to the end. And people say, how do you stand repeating like that in the theater? Every night you do the same thing. But it's never the same. And each individual audience is so different. Everyone has their own vibration and electricity or lack of it. And that feeds into the energy of the thing, and there's always something to discover. It's like a great poem. It can be 14 lines, but there's so much in it. And you read it over the lifetime, and it's always got a different meaning. So acting in film, did you find it disconcerting? I found it.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I did.
Just in the beginning, it was hard. But what I found for me, I don't know if you felt this, that the first reading of a play is like being in a movie. That's the goal, is to get to the first reading. When you're in a play, the actors gather around a table and the director, they don't know each other. And they come in and they show you the set. This is what the set is going to do. There's a little mock-up of the set. And everybody's very nervous. And all you can do is attach to this fiction that's on the page. You have that, nothing but that, and the eyes of the person you're working with. So it happens in the air. Usually, the first reading of a play is so exciting. It's fantastic. Everything after that in the rehearsal period is not as good. And we think, how do we get back to the first reading? Because that first reading, and I think that's like the encounter in film. Each day you have a completely different scene. Yes, it's out of order. But if you've got it in your mind, the whole piece, and you've sort of lived it in some way at home in preparing, then you come to the set and forget your preparation, and you just look into the eyes of the person you're with. That's the only place you are. It's just being, living, acting, and listening.
We were talking before when we were having lunch, characters that for me may have represented, what they were, an entertainment, like Zorro, for example. But I remember when I arrived to the United States and I did The Mambo Kings, that was the first movie that I did there, I was working with a lot of Hispano, Latino actors. And they said to me something that it got stuck in my mind, from that time. It says, if you're going to stay here in America and you're going to work in here, you're going to play villains. You're going to be the bad guy. Or you're going to be poor. You're going to be cleaning the garden, doing these kind of jobs, because that's what Latinos are doing here in America. So black and Latinos, they are the bad guys. So 4 or 5 years after that, Hollywood started experimenting some changes. And then I was doing Zorro. And I was the hero, and I had an accent, and the bad guys didn't have an accent, and they were blonde and they had blue eyes. You have no idea what that meant for the Spanish community to have their own hero, that somebody that inspired them to say, we have our own hero here. And for years, still now, I go to Los Angeles, if I'm going to park a car or I see some Latino on the street, they always say, Zorro. And so in a way, I start experimenting through that character. And
but let me tell you something, Antonio. Nobody does anything in Hollywood unless they think they're going to make a lot of money, and they suddenly realized, oh my God, there's all this money, that the Latino audience is going to love this, and so will everyone else. That was a revelation. That's breaking through to make them, this is movies, chick flicks, they used to call them, chick flicks, and it was like a lower echelon of film. There was film, there was the Scorsese film, and then there were chick flicks, and they were, not as important. A question of educating the people that ran the studios to know there is an audience for things that don't appeal necessarily to them, because by and large, the people that run the studios are 50 to 60-year-old white men. And pretty much what they think is fun is what you see on the screens, because it appeals to them. This is not to denigrate men at all, but we like what we like. And they don't like those other things that are not about them. Right. So you have to show them that they'll make money if they make the other things that are not about them specifically, and then they're perfectly happy to make those films. So this is The Devil Wears Prada or Mamma Mia or any of these films. Thank you. Or my friend Greta Gerwig just made Barbie. So this was so hard, and each time out for a woman, it's difficult to get funding. Just 2 weeks, well, I don't want to tell any tales.
Do you think that
but it's just difficult.
Every genuine movement that happened in the world can be translated into money?
Yes.
By Hollywood?
I do. I don't think it's out of the goodness of their heart at all. I think, and it's true, the world is big and wide. We can cross borders with all sorts of stories. That's the thing. When we made The Devil Wears Prada, the studio, they send out these cards to people, and how did you like the film? And the sort of experimental, what do they call them? They
do these tests.
They screen them. They do
screen tests.
Test screenings. Yeah. And men like this movie because they could identify with a female character. The hardest thing is for a man to climb into the character, to feel as if he is a female protagonist. It's very difficult for a member of the audience. Yeah. It's easier for women to imagine that, for a little girl to imagine she's Peter Pan, because she doesn't want to be Wendy or Tinkerbell. the interesting character is, and so we're used to, in literature as women and girls, we're used to identifying with a protagonist who's a male. It's not a problem. Anything, of course, we can appreciate the stories, but it's for some reason more difficult for a man to identify with a female protagonist. But in The Devil Wears Prada, because she was a boss, because she had business responsibilities, and because they were in a scene shown to be crushing, trying to make all sides happy and to keep a business alive. And the men could identify with that. And they said to me, that was the first time I'd ever had men come up and say, I know how you felt in that film. And that's an amazing thing.
Did it happen too with the Iron Lady?
No, because nobody wanted to really identify with Margaret Thatcher. But I think that piece set out to do a different thing, to sort of like a female Lear. Lear is not a wonderful character, but powerful and used to being powerful. And you see the degradation of it that comes to all human beings. It doesn't matter how high you get, how powerful, how potent you are in the world. Everyone is cut down in the end and has to reckon with their life and the choices that they've made. And that's more what that film was about. It was about old age. Yeah.
What are we going to do with artificial intelligence, Meryl?
And applied to cinema, I think they have the capacity to generate the images of people that never existed. At first, my business was very afraid that they're going to steal our images. They don't need our images. They can make amalgamate images of people that are more beautiful, more powerful, more terrifying than anyone that exists. And it's just, will an audience want it? That's the question. Will an audience adhere to completely inanimate, imaginary creatures? Or will we long for the human? And I think, don't you?
But the
that
question
we're going
is,
to long
are
for
we
the
going to
human.
know?
Huh?
Are we going to know they are not real?
Well, I always think, can't you tell? Even now.
I think now still you can tell. But what is going to happen in 5, in 10 years?
I'm very afraid for our political world, which we can manufacture, so they'll manufacture people doing things that they did not do, and the actual ability to verify events is going to be very, very difficult.
To verify events, things that never happened.
To apply, yes, to be able to credit that what you're seeing on the screen is really happened. And that will call into question everything except what you can feel and touch and see and experience in person. I think that's going to be very tricky.
We have to go back to theater. We have to go back
I think we have to have theater and in live events, and people have to see each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the worst enemy of an actor? It could be self-consciousness.
Self-consciousness. I was just going to say that.
Really?
Absolutely. Yes. To worry about how it looks or seems, or anything that pulls you out. The love affair I have with acting is the abandon.
Abandon.
Because you're in a fiction, it's a safe place to be insane. In real life, you can't do that, especially if you have small children. Yeah. You have to be responsible. You have to be but in this fictive world, you can explore your most murderous impulses, the things that are out of bounds, because that's our job, is to imagine the best and the worst of human beings, because it's all in the mix, and it's what we owe to people is to go as far as you can, and as dark and as light a place as we can, because that's the feeling of being alive. That's what I take from performances that I love. Don't you, when you go to the theater or you see a performance in a movie that you really love, it makes you feel like you've done something, that like you're more alive or connected to the universe or something.
And also, the capacity that actors have to make people relax.
Yeah.
When you're too busy trying just to communicate something, you get the audience intention with you,
Yes.
because they want the thing to happen too.
Right.
They're pushing. And
Yeah.
so, but if you see somebody, as you said before, in abandonment, letting the thing go,
Yeah.
then everybody relaxes, and then you get into the story, and then
Yeah.
you are not watching a movie, you're just into the reality.
It doesn't happen all the time.
No, but
Not
it's
at all.
something. Is that something that you learn, or is something that it comes with you, or is something that can be transformed by an event in your life?
I think that's true. I think it has. Every day, everything that happens comes to work with you. That's true. And if you have a life-altering event, the death of someone, the loss of someone, an illness, you have had this experience.
Yeah. I was, yeah.
Tell me about that, because I know that when you were.
Yeah, I suffered a heart attack on the 25th of January, 2017.
It was 2017, yeah.
Yeah, and I faced death, and it was a very strange day. But that night, at the hospital, St. George Hospital in London, a woman came into my room, a nurse, an older woman, and she made the most unusual question. She said to me, Antonio, do you believe in popular culture? And I thought, what the hell?
I thought you were going to say in God.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Why is she asking me if I believe in popular culture? And I said, yes, I guess. And she said, why do you think people says, I love you with all of my heart, and they don't say, I love you with all of my brain? She said that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know. He said, because the heart is not only just an organ of your body that transports oxygen, it's a warehouse of feelings. And she said, and now, in the next weeks, months, probably in your life, you are going to feel very sad and you're going to be very sensitive to things. I never saw that woman again, but it was true. In the weeks to come, I was crying for anything. I just listened to a song and I just got tears. I was looking at a painting. I went to see a movie and it was, what is happening to me? But now also in perspective, it's probably the best thing that ever happened in my life as an actor. Because it opened the door to a space in me that it wasn't there before. Without the heart attack, I couldn't have done Pain and Glory, for example.
Yeah.
I was in a state that I couldn't recognize that as happening to me before, to feel that you don't need to demonstrate anything, that you don't have to get what Almodóvar called wet emotion.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
to go there.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things come from the most unbelievable place. And if you look for the emotion in the big thing, probably never comes.
No.
And you see an actor struggling.
Yeah. No,
And
I know.
it never happened,
Yeah.
right?
I feel sad when I see an actor who has that trouble. Open their pores to this moment. That's all we have to do. It sounds simple. I suppose it's not simple. But that is all you have to do. Because your lifeline is in the other person that's in the scene with you. And you're never alone unless you are alone.
Do you still, after so many years as a professional, do you still confront scenes in which you say to yourself, right on the set, I am not in?
All the time.
What do you do?
I go in the bathroom and
Yeah.
but you just there's nobody to beat up but yourself, Yeah. But I love working because it asks you to break down those barriers within yourself. That's all it asks, is to actually just be who you are, know what you know. And that's my mantra. When I go back to it every time, I say, you be who you are. Know what you know. And I always come home. That's what it is. It's coming home. The performance isn't out there. There isn't a character you're reaching for. It's right at home. It's right here. Just find a quiet place. Sometimes I have to do that. Yeah. But acting is mysterious. I don't understand it at all.
But you don't have a special method, a specific method. It may change depending on the character that you're doing, how you research for the character, how you prepare.
No, I already, I don't know if you feel this, but when you read a piece of material, I read a lot of things that aren't any good or they aren't right for me. But I read something and then I go, oh,
that's it.
Just on one page, one thing that person said, something locks in, and I know that. I feel that. I can do that. I can be her. I understand her.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why I say it's very hard to talk about acting. I've never really been very successful talking about it or teaching. I don't understand how to teach.
It's true. It's very abstract. I always felt like that too. You said it before. The first time that you read a script is the only time actually that you are a spectator.
That
you are a spectator of your own work.
Yes.
Once you read it once and you start thinking in terms of, I have to work on this, you're contaminated because you start thinking, in all the possibilities that you can use in order to perform a character. But that first time that you read it is...
Yeah, I used to have a really formidable memory, and I would often read a script, and if I loved it, if it went in, I didn't read it again. And I would come to the script in the morning of the day we would shoot a scene. I remember in Sophie's Choice, that part, when I read it the first time, just went in. I had to learn the German parts and the parts where I spoke Polish, but the rest of it, I didn't have to read it again. I remembered it. It went so deep in me.
Really?
Yeah. It's not anything that's true now, certainly. Now my memory isn't that sharp, but when I was young, yes, I would remember. Yeah.
Oh my God! But that's a very extraordinary thing. That's not common.
No. you know what scripts are like too. You don't usually have so much to say. It's not a lot. And I would come in and look at the scene in the morning in the makeup thing, and I would remember what I was supposed to say. But I didn't read the script all the time. That's something that came to me later to help reorder the scenes, you know, when we shoot wildly out of order. But yeah, now I have to read it all the time. But
What is your relationship with awards and receiving recognition and the Oscars and the Golden
with
Globes?
awards.
Yeah.
Well, this one is very, very meaningful because of all the very important people that have received it for doing real things. And sometimes, yeah, I feel like my contribution isn't to the level of a molecular biologist, but I am grateful because I do know the value of arts in my life to me from what other people give me in films and theater. So I can extrapolate that out and understand it. But I do feel gratitude, and I do feel unworthy, and I do feel extremely touched to be in this company of people. I do.
You know, in a way, an award is a way to say thank you. Thank you for helping us to understand the world in which we live through the characters that you have played.
I
for
say
many
the same
years.
to you, Antonio.
Thank you.
Your work is like food to us, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this overwhelming conversation. It's about your life, about art, about entertainment. Thank you so much. But the audience is willing to make some questions to you. There have been thousands of them, but I want to point some of them that I have here. And the first one is by Natalia Alonso, and her question is, what role in your entire artistic career do you consider the most challenging to portray?
Challenging.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone is too young to remember this one, but a long time ago, I played a woman in a film called Kramer versus Kramer.
Yes.
And it was difficult because it was based on a book. The book came out at the dawn of the women's movement, and it was sort of a backlash book. It was a book that heaped blame on a wife who abandoned her family. That's how it was portrayed. And I was in the very beginning of the film where I'm putting down my keys and the credit card, and I'm leaving my 4-year-old son in the hands of his very busy businessman father, and I'm off. And you don't know where she's gone. The husband doesn't know what's happened, and she's gone for the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie is the man getting to know his son and falling in love with his son. And then she comes back asking for custody of the boy. And I knew that this book on some level was dismissive of the attitude of the woman or of her needs and her brokenness and what would make you leave a child. And when I made it, I didn't have a baby yet. And during the shoot, I got pregnant, and when we were shooting, we stopped and came back and reshot the ending, and I was like this in the elevator scene. I knew that there was something missing in the script, and I was able to, with the director, who was so generous, and Dustin Hoffman, who was so willing to let me make my plea in the court and to speak for her, speak for this woman who needed to go away or she would break. She was going to have a psychotic break. That was very challenging because it was not only to ask an audience to understand this point of view, but also to write it myself. So that was challenging. But I have to tell you that film, when I went to China, maybe 12 years ago, I was so amazed that so many people knew me. Even when we went to outside of Beijing and Xi'an and all this, and the interpreter—
Because of that.
Yes, they recognized me. And the interpreter said, after the Cultural Revolution, this was the first American film to be allowed into China, because I believe they thought that it made American women look terrible.
Oh my God.
And America looked bad, women leave their children. But so many Chinese women thought, I understand her. So that was, it was win-win. It was good.
On the target.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sonia Pilar Muñoz is asking if you could change any of the decisions your characters have made that have had a significant impact on the movie's plot. Which one would you change?
A lot of people wanted me to get out of the truck in the bridges of Madison County. And today, I had a wonderful encounter with a bunch of high school-aged kids who had been forced to look at my films and imagine alternate scenarios. And there were 3 girls who stood up and said, we looked at the bridges of Madison County, and we have an alternate ending. and I thought, oh, I know what this is. And they said, and we think that she should get out of the truck and not go with him and not go with the husband, but go on her own.
Awesome.
Great.
You got a script writer there.
Maria Elena, question is, the Princess of Asturias Award, Nucho Ordine, spoke about the utility of art. Do you believe that today's society still views the arts as useful and necessary?
I couldn't live without art. I need music as I need food.
Yeah.
I think without artists, we wouldn't be what we are. I think we need to look at them actually more, no less, in order to learn what we are as human beings and what is the role that we have to play. I think, for example, here in Spain, we should look at our classics. We should go back and see the works of Falla in music, to see what Cervantes wrote, read El Quijote. Again, we have to read the poetry of Lorca, of Machado, and we have to just do that in order to understand understand the human being from a profound point of view. We have a problem that travels in our pockets, and it's this technology that is driving everybody nuts, that we dedicate so much hours a day, and it's so frivolous, everything that comes out of there is very dangerous. Of course, the new technologies have beautiful things too, but we have to be alert of all the bad things that it's bringing. We are losing touch with reality. We have to actually go back to the classics and read and have patience, to sit down in front of a play of theater and let yourself go a little bit, to be bathed by, reflections of people. I think we couldn't live without art. I think we need art to continue surviving, definitely.
I think it's very true. And I think we are at an inflection point in society where our brains have been retrained not to be able to concentrate deeply. I think we go laterally. We don't go vertically. We connect in very wide spaces, but we understand very little.
Yeah.
In the United States, there's a tendency in pedagogy to teach children, to emphasize now, they're cutting the arts out of the curriculum in schools. Cutting the arts out. The arts are why I went to school. When I was little, I wanted to draw and have music, and I'd learn the other stuff too. But it's what pulls human beings to, as we said, feeling alive. And if in 3 years there are no more human programmers, if there's no more human interface in data work, what are we going to do with all these STEM graduates who, it's a kind of crazy.
But even in the own fight, the personal fight that you have, not just as an artist, but somebody who wants to understand the work of others. I remember, for example, I love opera. And I have this, of course, in opera, you go immediately to Puccini.
Yeah.
And you go to Bizet and to the operas that are very melodic. But I couldn't understand Wagner, for example. I have to fight my way into Wagner. And I was there fighting, struggling in order to, why this guy is so important to people who love music, but I don't understand what he does, or it doesn't hit me in the same way. And I remember again and again being patient until I start taking a thread, and I remember it was with Tristan and Isolde, and suddenly it opens the world when you dedicate time. It happens to me also with William Faulkner. I remember reading The Bear, and I remember going back and forth in the book so many times because I couldn't really understand until you actually develop an attention and you start just putting the layers together and having that patience, then a world opens. One day a door opens to you and you start understanding when this guy is talking about the Mississippi River and everything that is happening around that. So, we have to teach our young kids to have that patience and to go deep in issues. Don't stay in the surface. And there is a beautiful way to do that, and it's called art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This question from Miriam Sirgo is for you, Meryl. The film industry has evolved significantly over the years. How have you seen the roles for women in the industry change during your career? And what challenges do you think still need to be addressed?
Come sit with me. Let's see. When I began, no women in the C-suite, what they call this, the corporate seats. And now there are many, many women at high levels in the decision-making process. So that, of necessity, changes what the offerings are in film and television. Interestingly, film used to be regarded as a higher art form than television. Now, with all the streaming and the melding of the screens and everybody having their big flat screen at home, and it's more of a bleed among these things. Television was always very popular for women's material. And so you would see Lucille Ball or you would see careers, Carol Burnett, on television that never could have existed. They were their own producers, they ran their own companies. That didn't happen in film. But because television was where advertisements were, and advertisements, women looked at those. They did all the shopping. They bought all the products. And so television was a much friendlier landscape for women's stories, women's interests. And when the movies came into the television, it was, they had to accommodate that. So often we have more story-centric, character-driven stories coming on these great shows on television now. We have some of our greatest writing, and a lot of the film business is taken up with the people that go to the movies, which are, first night boys, a lot of the superhero movies driven by all of that interest. But the audience at home is looking at sort of the more complex things. Do you see what I'm saying?
We surf a lot. Sometimes
It's sort of
I am
switched.
surfing so much in platforms that after half an hour surfing, I go to sleep.
You give up. I get a book.
And I didn't see anything.
A book. Yeah. And this is from Elisa Vega. How do you think actors can navigate the challenge of not getting typecast into a particular character or genre? And what strategies have you personally used to avoid this in your career?
Oh my God.
Oh, that's good. That's a good one. Okay. Yeah. That is, when I was very young, the first movies I made were all starring long blonde hair. So it was Kramer versus Kramer, Manhattan, The Deer Hunter. And I realized that I was getting parts for serious, little sad women who looked a certain way. And it was important to me to screw with that and to play with it, because I always thought of myself, even back in drama school, as a character actor, not as a leading actor. I had someone, talk about advice. Dino De Laurentiis once, his son had seen me in a play, and he brought me in to the Gulf and Western building. Dino De Laurentiis had an enormous suite at the top of the Gulf and Western building in New York to be in King Kong. And his son brought me in, and Dino looks up from his desk, and he goes, perché mi porta, che brutta, so. And so I had studied Italian in college for 1 year. I didn't know everything, but I said, mi dispiace molto, ma ecco, io, So I said, I'm very sorry, this is what you get. And he was so shocked that because no Americans know any languages, you can count on that. But he wanted just a beauty, and I never thought of myself that way. I always thought, well, you have that nose, you're going to have to be a character actor all your life. And I said, great, because those are the good parts.
Well,
But I've tried to make all my life the women who were the leading characters bumpy and interesting, and to incorporate the contradictions and their beauty and their ugliness both, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this heartful conversation. And this but not last, we would like to ask you to have a souvenir from this amazing day.
Yes.
And have a picture taken by a photographer of you both with the audience, with this fantastic audience.
Thank you. That's just wonderful.
You can stand here.
Thank you. Thank you.